Welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. This is the Blackstone LaunchPad's, I think it's the 6th or 7th workshop this semester. I think we're already recording. If not, Andrew, can you hit that for me real quick? My name is Honorary Clark, and I'm joined by Andrew. We're both hosting the workshop by Blackstone LaunchPad. Blackstone LaunchPad is located in 220 SU, and it's there to encourage and support students to develop entrepreneurship on the UB campus. It's designed to help students succeed, to become founders and contributors to growing startups. Today, we're going to be talking about rising capital. We invite an amazing speaker to have with us today, Jack McGowan. And without further ado, let me present Jack. So Jack is a project manager at InStyle Consulting, a not-for-profit. He's the director of Western New York Venture Association and / Buffalo Angels. He has extensive experience with the U.S. Small Business Innovation Research R&D funding program. He has an MBA from RUB, and he has a BS from Cornell University, which is not too far away. I think it's in Ithaca. Yeah.
Great. Yep.
All right. You could take it away, Jack.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me this evening on 80 degrees and 80 degrees in April is tough to compete with. Could you enable screen sharing, please?
Oh, yeah, I'll do that right now. All right, you should be good to go.
All right. All right, do you see my slide deck?
Yep, you're good.
Cool. Okay, well, thanks everybody. So, everybody always wants to, most startups need and want money. And it's not easy to get, and there are a lot of different sources of it, and there's a lot of misconceptions about raising it. So I'm going to try to give you kind of an overview about the typical sources of funding that startups get, and I'll do kind of a little bit of a deeper dive into angel investing, which is usually one of the earlier sources of funding that startups often pursue, and give you some little bit of background on that and some tips to help you prepare if you should decide to move forward with angel investing. As Honorary had mentioned in introduction, I am, part of my job, I serve as the director of the West New York Venture Association of Buffalo Angels, which is a local angel investor group. So I deal with a lot of startups. I've seen more pitch decks than I can imagine. I can count, and I've seen some really good ones, and some that needed some work, and hopefully it can come away better today after this presentation. So funding is a continuum, and as you see at the kind of the top here, the kind of the stages that a business will go through. Kind of start off as idea. And then you get into developing the proof of concept. Then you get your initial product, and you get some customers, and then hopefully you get to the point you're going to start to scale it up. And depending on what stage you're at, different sources of funding are appropriate, more appropriate than others for those particular stages. So if you kind of go along the same continuum, in the beginning. It's often, founders, friends, and family, the only ones that are going to give you any money in the beginning because they love you. So, because the business just isn't developed enough for somebody to be able to figure out, is there really a good investment opportunity here? And then, as you begin to progress, then you move on to angel investors who are, people who you didn't know before, and who are more interested in, potential opportunity that could, they know it's going to be high risk, but it could result in a good financial return for them. And then as you get further along, you move into venture capital, which I'll talk about the differences between angels and venture capital in a moment. But other sources, in addition to investors, there are things like accelerator programs and economic development programs and contests, which I'll talk about. There are some, not a lot, but there are some government grant programs. And then as you get farther on, you might qualify for bank funding, bank loans, and some programs from government agencies. All through this process, one way of potentially getting the resources you need to launch your business and progress it forward. Maybe you decide to, rather than get investors, you license your technology to another company, or you enter into a joint venture. And the most important source of revenue that you want to be working toward is sales revenue. That's the best thing. Rather than trying to raise money from somebody, if you're selling your product and you're generating cash that way, that's certainly a very, very important and very good thing. So I'm going to walk through these sources of funding. So the first one, as I mentioned, it's founders, friends, and family. The three F's. Sometimes they call it the four F's: founders, friends, family, and fools. And the thing is, it's kind of the table stakes to get in. To assume that some third party is going to give you money before you've done anything is just the idea stage. It's highly improbable. So if you show that you're willing to put in money from yourself or from someone you really care about, and you would really, really bother you if you lost their money, and it would ruin Thanksgiving for the rest of your life, then it shows that you're really serious, and you're going to work really hard on making this a success, because you don't want to lose your money, or you don't want to lose your family's money, or your friends, or what have you. It also provides some resources so you can start to validate that concept. You can develop your prototypes. You can take it maybe beyond that. You can test it to make sure that it works. You can start to get some demonstrate some customer traction. So that initial money provides validation, and it starts to reduce the risk, which is usually one of the big hurdles that other funders may cite as a reason to want to invest, because it's just too risky at that stage. So it's that early money. And what are some of those sources? Some people will take out a second mortgage on their house. Some people will get a few credit cards and draw the money down on the credit cards, which is high risk. Or they've got, again, friends and family who are willing to provide some cash. Another way of funding your business without getting it from third parties that that aren't friends and family is bootstrapping. And there are ways of being creative and doing that. Things like getting some credit from vendors. So if you need to, let's say you need to purchase some components, or you need to get some services or whatever, if you can negotiate with these folks that, okay, you know what, I'll, please give me terms, I'll pay you in 90 days. But if during that 90 days, you can then take those products or services that you have to pay for and convert them into your product and sell them and collect the money from sales, then, if you can do that in less than that 90 days, then, you've gotten, in effect, a free loan from your vendors, and you'll be able to pay them back. It's a challenge to do that, certainly, but, being kind of scrappy and finding ways to, manage your cash flows so that, you can, you can manage your credit from your vendors, or get advances from these folks. Say, okay, you know what, if you can give me 50% down, and then you can pay me back after then you can pay me over terms after that. You can use their money to, again, get the things that you need to be able to deliver. Sometimes people will barter. They might swap out for services. It could be some early equity, small amount of equity, although that can get expensive. Or sometimes you can provide some services. Oftentimes companies will start off by doing consulting work, doing paid consulting work in the area that they're looking to build a product on. and generate some money, some cash that way before they actually spend the money to build the product. And as I mentioned before, I mean, the biggest thing you can do is just, if you can generate sales, get to sales as quickly as you can, even if your product isn't, the ultimate version that it's going to be. If you can get it to the point that minimal viable product where people are going to pay you, that's really where you want to get to. So there are some really successful companies, and in fact, most companies don't get third-party investment. They do it through bootstrapping. So here are a couple of quotes. So hardly any of you will ever get VC, which is true. The odds of getting venture capital funding are quite low. So if you want to build a major business, learn to build it without VC. That's what most of the billion-dollar entrepreneurs did. Outside of Silicon Valley, 91% of these billion-dollar entrepreneurs like Dell and Bloomberg built their giant businesses without VC funding. Dell started from a business in his dorm room. It's a pretty well-known story, and used finance from customers and family, and he built a huge company. So this was in an article in Forbes by Dilip Rao, a couple of articles back in July and August. But it's the truth that it's hard to raise outside funding, and most companies aren't going to get it. So moving through some other sources, obviously if you can get it, government grants are a wonderful thing. There aren't too many grant programs available, but there are a few. Usually they focus on, rather than just kind of giving you general money to grow your business and launch your business, there's a source of funding called Small Business Innovation Research Grants, or the acronym is SBIR. And this is a program of the federal government that basically will fund R&D. So companies aren't, so it's not the same kind of pitch you'd have to an investor. You're funding, you're proposing a scope of research work that the government deems to be important, and they think you've got the qualifications to pull it off. So in some cases they can provide in this particular program, starting off, it might start off at $100,000 or $125,000, but it can end up eventually being millions of dollars if your project is successful and if the potential is large enough. So if your business really hinges on doing R&D first to be able to prove the concept and develop a product, this SBIR funding is a huge potential source and very important. Sometimes there are government capital grants but there tend to be more for existing business and for the expansion of business. Like, you may, if you're following in the press, you'll see press releases that, the governor has announced, the state's going to, contribute, $2 million for, the expansion of a company because they're going to, build a building and they're going to be, adding so many jobs. That's typically the type of project that will get a grant from the government, from the state, rather than a startup that's high risk, generally needs less money, and really doesn't have the assets and the immediate scale up in jobs that the government likes to see. And then these government grant programs often, they'll often require, they're not going to be the only funding. They're going to require the company. So for instance, if it's $20 million project, the company is coming up with 10 million or more of that money, and then the state will come up with with a matching grant. There are some new state programs that provide grants for early stage companies. Fuse Hub, which is it's a not-for-profit economic development organization that's affiliated with New York State, has come up with a couple of, in the course of the year, a couple of solicitations where they are taking grants for promising startups. So if you go to the Fuse Hub website, you can see the schedule and the process for applying there. NYSERDA is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. As their name implies, they have a focus strictly on kind of green tech companies in the energy space, but they will come out with a series of grant solicitations. And then UB, through their business and entrepreneur partnerships, will occasionally come up with, through they have the CAT, which is the Center for Advanced Technology. They come up with solicitations for small grants for startups as well. So, there aren't a lot, and they're highly competitive, but there are some government grant programs available through these organizations. Something that's really kind of come up in the last 5 to 10 years is the rise of competitions for startups to get some of that early money, as well as getting, as you know, those of you who are, in Panache or some of these competitions, they give you coaching, they give you exposure, and if you're a winner or if you finish in the top 3 or so, you get some money as well. So there's certainly Panache, which is obviously going to be tomorrow. So somebody will be walking, a couple teams will walk away with some money there. 43 North is kind of the big one in New York State. $1 million top prize and $500,000 in others. That's for companies that are they're a little bit more advanced than fresh startups. Grow New York is focusing on food and agriculture companies. 76 West is on clean tech. Genius is in Syracuse, that focuses on companies that are in kind of the aviation and the drone space. The New York business plan, the student business plan competition, and then the Entrepreneurs Organization, and they have regionals. I know that UB they come to UB every year, and they have kind of regional competition here. So and then Luminate is focusing on in Rochester, and that focuses on companies that are in the optics space. So there's a real lot of different competitions now. Many of these are for companies that are not pure startups; they're a little bit farther advanced. But certainly, the Panache is for earlier stage companies. And here's a list, and I don't know if Alex Pelk mentioned, but I sent her this pitch deck, so you'll all be able to get a copy of the pitch deck. So I've got all these links here that you don't have to scramble and copy them down. You can get a copy of the deck, and it links to these various competitions, so you can learn about what their criteria are, their timing, and see if applying is a fit for you. In addition to the grants, and most of these competitions are government funded, the government does have some loan guarantee programs as well. These again tend to be for companies that are more mature. Usually they, in most cases, they can actually qualify for bank financing, but it's not enough bank financing to fit the whole need of what they need for their particular project. So the government will step in and supplement, usually provide a match to what the bank finances to allow these companies to have the funding they need to move forward. The key sources of that type of funding, the Erie County Industrial Development Agency is a local organization that has some grant programs and small amount of grants, mostly loans. The U.S. Small Business Administration has a loan guarantee program that makes banks more willing to loan the money to the companies because the government will guarantee a portion of it. And Empire State Development, which is New York State, and they come out with some matching programs as well. Another source of funding that I think a lot of startups are taking advantage of now, and it's grown over the past 5 to 10 years, is crowdfunding. And there are different categories of crowdfunding. When it first started, there was what's the term is the contributions or rewards crowdfunding. So you're not those funders aren't actually investing. It's a donation, or sometimes it's sort of a pre-purchase of the company's product. So, for instance, the folks at Aviate Audio, who were a Panache winner a couple of years ago. They did a crowdfunding campaign, and for people that gave money at various levels, they would get in return, after the company was able to use the money they raised to actually develop their product, because they didn't have the product made at that point. The people who were donors will get a unit of the product, or it could be, depending on how much they invest. They might get multiple units, or for small amounts, you usually get like something like a sticker or a T-shirt. You're not getting the product, but you're getting some kind of a thank you for for contributing to the company. So Kickstarter and Indiegogo are that type, where it's a donation, or in effect sort of a pre-purchase. You're not actually buying it, but you're getting the promise that hopefully, if the company is successful, they'll be able to send you the product. A few years ago, a new type of crowdfunding came aboard, which is equity crowdfunding, where individuals actually are investing and getting shares in the companies that are raising money on these platforms. This took rules by the federal government to allow this to happen, and there are some pretty severe restrictions on the amount of money that investors can invest through these platforms. But it does allow people who are not extremely wealthy, don't meet the high net worth or high income qualifications, to be able to invest in some of these early stage companies in small amounts. And again, you do that through these online platforms, and there's a few that exist. So the WeFunder is one that's quite popular now. There's AngelList and EquityNet. There are a number of these crowdfunding equity platforms that exist, that companies who are looking to raise money will they'll apply to these platforms. They'll provide the information, and then the information becomes made available to the general public, so they can consider whether or not they want to invest. Another way of getting the money you need, or getting the resources that you need to take your product or your service to fruition. Sometimes it doesn't involve somebody writing you a check. Sometimes it basically involves partnering with an existing business that already has a lot of the resources that you need to be successful. So it may have a sales force, it may have production capabilities, it may already have customers, customer relationships lined up. So rather than your startup raising money to develop all these things on your own, you can either enter into a license with this company where they say, what, we'll do all this messy business stuff. But you've got a great technology that we think that we can take this technology, we can kind of put it into our business model and our production model, and we'll sell it, and then we'll give you a licensing fee, a royalty, usually it's based on how much they sell. So kind of typically they might give you a modest amount of money up front when you enter into a license agreement, and then they'll give you 5%, 7%, whatever. It's subject to negotiation of every dollar that they sell. So from the founder's standpoint, this is a pretty nice deal because they'll do all the work, and they're basically taking the risk, and they're going to send you money on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis. For oftentimes the founder might stay on as a technical advisor and still be involved, but the heavy lifting is done by the company that's got the license agreement. Another way of doing it is by partnering with another company. So maybe it's not as complete, if you will, as a license where they're going to do everything and you kind of sit back and collect your checks, but they will do certain elements. You enter an agreement where maybe they will make the product and sell the product, but the founding company will continue to do, product development, product enhancements, version 2, version 3, version 4, be involved in the sales process, so you'll determine what are the relative strengths of the two partners and enter an agreement that hopefully leverages those strengths. So you work together, hopefully to successfully launch the product or service in a successful company. Another way of advancing your business and sometimes getting money is through accelerator programs. And there are some big names like Y Combinator and Techstars, where companies founders will apply to be accepted. They usually involve working with them for a period of time, going through their education program and their mentoring program, and they'll make bring in experts and make introductions to potential customers and potential funders. And they're not all the same, but often they will give you in exchange for equity. In addition to the services they provide, they may provide a small amount of cash as well. So that's another model of getting some money and getting other resources and guidance that you need to be successful. Techstars and Y Combinator are international and well known. There are many programs. Many are very specialized in particular types of industries. It might be food or clean tech or whatever you're doing. On the local basis, Launch New York is sort of an accelerator in that they have a program where they provide mentorship. And then for some of the companies that go through the mentor program, they'll provide investment as well. And UB, through their innovation hub, they have some programs too where they're providing the guidance and the mentoring, and in some cases they'll provide funding as well. There are some funds that are that are funded by the government, or at least getting some money from the government. And while they're still looking to make good investments that will provide a good return, they also, because they're not for profit, they have a public purpose as well. They want to grow companies in the community and create jobs and create wealth. And here in Western New York, the two most prominent are, Launch New York, which I mentioned a moment ago. They have a combination of the mentorship, and for some of the companies who qualify, they'll provide investment, and they tend to have criteria that are a little bit less stringent than funds that are in it purely for for profit. They're not for profits. So they'll tend to invest a little bit earlier in companies that are a little bit less developed than non-public funds. The Western New York Impact Investment Fund is a little bit different in that their focus is much more focused on creating jobs in the underserved community. So while they will invest in companies that are early stage and have strong potential, they invest in fewer companies than Launch New York does, and they are looking for more of a focus on, again, it's kind of not so much not as many as the high tech companies. They tend to be a little bit lower tech, and companies that are hopefully going to be creating jobs, primarily in the city of Buffalo. So moving into people who are doing this for more profit driven reasons. You've got the angel investors. These are private individuals, and so they're investing their own money. So it's not like a Launch New York or a Western New York Impact Fund that raise money from foundations or from the government. This is their own hard-earned cash. So if they lose it, there's a bit of pain. They often work in groups. They invest relatively small amounts of money compared to venture capital. So, some statistics nationally that, deal sizes tend to range Usually it's, might be, low millions to hundreds of thousands. The amount of that any one individual will put in is relatively modest. Usually it's somewhere, $10,000 to $100,000, and 100,000 is kind of high end for any individual to put the money in. Being that they're individuals, they've all got kind of different criteria that they use for deals that they like and that they want to invest in. Some it's really more kind of personal reasons. They really like the what the company's doing. So for instance, let's say it's a healthcare company, and the angel investor has got a family member that suffered from a health condition that this company's hopefully developing a problem that's going to solve. So they invest for more kind of emotional and personal reasons than they do strictly for financial reasons. There are others who are it's all about the money. Kevin O'Leary here. It's like, how am I going to make money? He when he invests on Shark Tank, it's not so much because of he likes the entrepreneur, and it's just more about does he like the business, and have they proven to him that the business has got a good shot of being successful. So the motivation and the criteria can vary from investor to investor. One of the things that you want to, a term you want to be familiar with is the term of being an accredited investor. And that's a term by the government. And what that is these are people that have demonstrated that they have either a minimum net worth or a minimum annual income that meets a hurdle that allows them to invest in companies that unaccredited investors can't. If you recall a moment ago, I mentioned about there's equity crowdfunding. People who do not meet this accredited investor definition can invest, but they're limited to investing very small amounts in any particular company. If someone meets the accredited investor definition, they can invest larger amounts in any company, and they don't have to go through these crowdfunding platforms like non-accredited investors do. So it's important to know that you're dealing with accredited investors, because if you take money from non-accrediteds and then you want to raise more money later on, it can sometimes cause problems, because the next round of investors, venture capitalists or whatever, they often don't want to get involved in deals where there are non-accredited investors, because if it goes bad, these unsophisticated non-accredited investors they might end trying to sue and whatever. So it can get nasty. Once if you're not going through a crowdfunding platform, you're really going to be dealing with accredited investors. And usually your documentation, they have to certify that they meet that criteria. So how do angels work? Being people, they work all sorts of different ways. Some invest as individuals. So basically it's kind of an extension of friends and family. They're going to invest based on just whatever their reason is. Sometimes they might write a check of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's pretty rare. It tends to be pretty small amounts. There are some groups that are kind of private and under the radar. Groups of high net worth individuals that are basically kind of friends, and they guys kind of get together, and somebody says, I'm in this kind of neat deal that I like. You ought to take a look at it. And they, so it's very informal. So they might round up a couple of their friends and invest in a company. Then there are more, kind of publicized groups. Things such as the Buffalo Angels, and there's a group in Rochester, and some others that I'll be mentioning to you. But we're not secret. We've got a website. We let people know about our group. We take in new members if they meet the accredited investor definition. We're not venture capital funds, but we're not kind of just a group of a couple of folks who decide to do a deal together once in a while. We have more of a formal process and a way for companies to be able to learn about us and reach out to us. So in upstate New York, there aren't a lot of organized angel groups, but these are those groups. So there's the Buffalo Angels, which is the group that I'm part of. There's another group called Buffalo Capital Partners that is actually affiliated with a venture capital firm called Impact Capital. But there's on the Impact Capital website, there's some information about the members of Buffalo Capital Partners. The Eastern New York Angels are in the Hudson Valley, or more about the Albany area. There's a group in Hudson Valley. Red Bear Angels only invest in companies that have a Cornell affiliation, and they're based out of Ithaca. Rochester Angels, and then Varia Ventures is another group that's relatively new here in Buffalo, and they have a little bit different model in terms of they are sort of almost a bit of an accelerator, as well as they then assemble a group of angels to come in some deals that they like. But you can go to all those websites and learn more specifics about those groups. Outside of upstate New York, there are certainly groups of angels everywhere. And the Angel Capital Association is a national group that many groups such as ours belong to. And you can go on their website and you can see a list of all their members. I mean, most angels do tend to be somewhat local in the companies that they want to invest in. So if you were to go to the Angel Capital Association site and say, oh, there's a lot of angel groups in California, I'm going to start sending them my pitch deck, it may not be very productive. So you really would want to learn more about these groups first and see if they have a geographic restriction as to where they're willing to consider accepting potential investment from. Gust is an online platform that many groups belong to, ourselves included, and you can actually apply to the groups through Gust. They have an online application process. So again, you can search, look for groups, learn about their criteria, and contact them through this Gust platform. And then if you're in Canada, there's the National Angel Capital Association in Canada. I don't know, some of the Canadian groups will consider investment in US-based companies, but many of them don't. But again, you can go on that website and learn about their member organizations as well. So the next step in that progression, usually it's kind of, friends and family, and maybe you've won a couple of competitions and maybe gotten a grant or two, and now you're evolving your business. It's a little less risky. It's got a little bit more traction, and now you need more money in larger amounts to really start to scale. You've proven the concept. Now let's add more gas here, more fuel to the fire here, and really make this thing take off. That's where the venture capital firms tend to come in. So they're professional investors. They're the people that do this for a living. They raised funds themselves. They're using other people's money. Usually it's institutional money that they've gone out and they've raised a fund of 50 million, 100 million, $500 million that they now need to deploy. They need to put this money out. So they're looking for larger deals. So if you're really at this stage, you need, $500,000 or 250,000 or whatever, you're going to be considered too small for venture capital firms because, they don't have the time to be looking at all these small investments because it takes almost as much time to analyze a small investment as it does a larger investment. So they tend to do larger amounts, have stricter criteria. They're not going to be, the emotion, invest for personal or emotional reasons. And, again, they're funding growth rather than startup. So, some of the venture capital firms in upstate New York are, there's Impact Capital, which is a relatively new firm in Rochester. Impellant Ventures is a relatively new firm in Rochester. Armory Square Ventures is in Syracuse. Rand Capital has been around a long time there in Buffalo. Cayuga Venture Fund is in Ithaca. And then the Upstate Capital Association isn't a venture capital firm, but it's an association that many venture capital firms become members of. So if you go to the Upstate Capital site and you participate in some of their events, there's a good chance that you can get introductions and meet venture capital firms and begin to start to build those relationships with them. Because there's not a whole lot of venture capital in upstate New York, if you look at the numbers, we're kind of a venture capital desert in a lot of ways here. So, New York State has tried to supplement that with some state-supported funds. So they have their own fund called New York Ventures, and they've also in the past invested state money in other venture capital firms who then reinvest that money into startups. They had a program called the Innovate New York, in which they invested in 5 or 6 venture capital firms. But unfortunately, those funds have all been invested over the last several years, so there's no more money involved through that program. But Excel Partners in Rochester, I believe, still has some state money that they're investing, as well as New York Ventures, which is the state's own arm. They all require co-investment, so they won't be the lead investor. They won't fund it all themselves. But if you're working with a venture capital firm, and let's say you need $2 million, and the VC says, "Well, I'll do $1 million of it, or I'll do 2/3 of it," then you might be able to work with one of these firms who will come in and co-invest along with these venture capital firms to get the money that a company needs. So kind of run you through the basic types of funding, and as I mentioned, the first really source of third-party funding tends to be angel investors. So what do they, what information do they want to see? What types of deals do they like to see? How do you prepare to go to investors? Because it's not having a lunch over and sketching it out on a napkin and having them say yes. Once in a while they might work with an individual angel, but it's certainly not usually the case. So in terms of preparation, first thing is take advantage of the organizations that are helping. I mean, you're doing that now with with Blackstone, LaunchPad, and it could be if you start to get involved with groups like Launch New York or other accelerators, they're going to help you to be able to start to speak the language and prepare for for third-party investors. So work with those groups. You need to pull together your information. Usually there are a few basic tools that you're going to have. You're going to have your executive summary. Usually it's a 1 or 2 pager that hits the key points and kind of explains the big picture of your company, the opportunity, the market, the product. You pull together that business plan and financial projections, which is provides a lot more detail that the executive summary is going to provide that summary of. Your pitch deck. I'm sure you've probably had several sessions about pulling together how to do a pitch deck, which is kind of the presentation version and the PowerPoint version of basically the executive summary. And then that elevator pitch, which is that thing that you rehearse so that if you do happen to get on a call with somebody, or you see somebody in the in a meeting or an elevator, when you've got really just kind of a minute or two to tell them what you're doing, to hopefully get their interest, to get them to agree to to want to learn more from you. They term that your elevator pitch. So that's that thing that when you're in that networking group, that's what you're practicing presenting. So you pull that information together. Then you got to figure out, okay, so who do I target? Who do I go after? So the best way to go about it is to get referrals to some of these investors, because if they hear that someone that they know and they trust has suggested that you contact them, they're going to be more willing to listen and read and potentially meet with you than if you just come to them cold, because they get so many people who are, sending them, cold emails or cold calls or cold pitch decks, that, you want to try to be able to stand out from that group that, that are all cold. So, to the degree you can get a referral from somebody that they know, if you can get a referral from things like Blackstone, LaunchPad, if they've got, they're developing a relationship with these investors. So, if they, to the point where they're willing to, provide an introduction, that adds a lot of value. Give yourself a lot of time for this process. It takes a long time. These, the investors are, they're busy. Many of them, especially angels, this isn't their job. They got a lot of other stuff they do. So this is a kind of a part-time use of their time. And also, they're not in a hurry to invest. You can try to create a sense of urgency, and we're raising 250,000 and we've already got 200 lined up. So that's a good thing. So you want to be able to communicate if that's the case. But most of them aren't going to get rushed into making an investment. So they're going to do however much time they think it takes to get to learn about your company and do their analysis. They're going to take that. So you want to be prepared for that. So you don't assume that you're going to get the money in a couple of weeks. It's going to take time, and budget that. Also, listen to feedback that you get when you start to reach out to investors, and if they give you feedback about things that they like, things they don't like about your business, things they don't understand, concerns that they have, they're not always right, but consider it. Weigh whether the points that they're making are valid or not. Many times they are, especially if you're getting the same feedback from multiple investors. Chances are they probably are right, and it might mean that you need to further develop your company before you're going to get more. Try to go for money, or sometimes you need to make changes. A lot of companies, they pivot from their first idea or from their first target market or whatever as they start to learn and get smarter as they go along. So listen to that feedback and act on it when you think it's appropriate. What types of companies do investors invest in? They're looking for scalable companies, companies that can grow significantly, because they're taking a high risk. Most companies that they invest in will fail. It's just, it's the data. So that means that the ones that work, the ones that don't fail, have to be able to provide a significant return to them to basically pay for the losers. So they're looking for companies usually with large market potential. 10 million or more in sales in 5 years is usually kind of the minimum. They're looking for companies that can provide a strong potential return on investment if they're successful. Usually 5 to 10 times their money back in 5 to 7 years. They're looking for an exit. They don't want to be in this forever. They want to see that you're going to, your company is going to be able to, take them out, pay them back by either through the sale of your company or going public or, refinancing your company so that they can get their money back. They don't want to be in this forever. So that's that exit opportunity and plan that they're looking for. And really, one of the challenges that if you're a service or a retail business, it's tough to scale those and tough to get that kind of return. So it's a challenge. Usually they're looking for software or medical devices or something that really can have potential to really grow and be unique and be able to be defendable against competition. So they're looking for sound business model. The team the team is so important to them that you're committed. This isn't just kind of a side gig. You're really committed to this, and when things get tough, you're gonna stay with it. You're not gonna quit and say, "Well, it was a good try. Sorry, investors. Your money's gone. I'm going off to a job now." And also, you can work with them. You're coachable. You're willing to listen. Not that you're a yes person and that whatever they say goes, because they're not always right, as I said, even though sometimes they think they are. But they can work with you. If they provide valid information and good points to you, you're going to listen to it, take it into account, and when appropriate, act on those actions. As I mentioned, they're looking for unique products with advantage over the competition, which means you've got some sort of barriers to entry. Oftentimes it might be intellectual property, not always, but they like to see intellectual property, patents, or trade secrets, and usually you're beyond this friends and family phase. They're looking for evidence of traction, that the product works, that some customers are starting to buy. Or if they're not buying, at least you've engaged with customers and that they're ready to buy when you've got the money to actually deliver and be able to have something you can sell to them. So they want to see that there's market need and acceptance is validated, and that you're beginning to execute on that plan. One thing that one of the phrases that I like is a pretty well-known investor and business entrepreneur is a guy by the name of Mark Schuster, and his blog is Both Sides of the Table, and he talks about when you're working with investors, be a line, not a dot, meaning you're going to have multiple interactions with them. That first time you meet them, that's the first dot, and you're going to tell them all about your business and why it's going to be successful and why they should invest. But this is the first time they've met you. You haven't really validated it. You haven't had a chance to show that you can execute. So if they like so far, we're going to say, okay, good. You know what? Let's get together again. Let's keep in touch. So hopefully the next time you keep in touch with them, further down this timeline, maybe when you first met with them, you told about your plans and you said, what? So, we're hoping that in, 3 months, we're going to have the first version of the product going to be ready. We're going to have spoken with 15 potential customers, and, we're going to get good feedback from them. So next time you meet, they're going to be looking for, so how'd you do? You said you were going to have this, you were going to do A, B, and C. And if you can come back and say, what, we did A, we did 3/4 of B, and then, we learned that C didn't make sense, but now we're working on D. Okay, what? That's good. That's progress. We're starting to build that line. We're starting to show that performance is improving over time. So let's get back together again. So what's going to happen in the next 2 months? And then you talk about what's going to happen in the next 2 months. And say, okay, so you want to be able to build that. If you can demonstrate traction and execution, and you can be a line in a positive trajectory, that's really what investors are looking for, rather than, again, that great idea and that they're going to fall in love with. And you know what? It's wonderful, but we haven't seen that it can actually happen yet. Also, you want to look for the right fit with your investors. Because as I mentioned, there are different types of investors, and they invest different deal sizes, geographic location, funding stages, different industries. Some people only invest in industries that they know, and some investors, they want somebody else to be the lead, to kind of do that, break the ground, to do the hard work, and then they'll co-invest. Most investors co-invest with others. It's rare that one investor is going to do the whole thing. So, many want to see that there's a lead investor that they can, that they have trust in, they have respect in, and then they're willing to follow on along and co-invest along with that lead. So looking for that fit's important. Here's some information sources. Some directories of investors, the Angel Capital Association, and on the Launch New York website, they've got a lot of good resources. The Angel Capital Association, Angel Resource Institute, and I really like this blog. Martin Zwillig and his Startup Professionals Musing blog are really good resources that provide good information on angel investing and building your business. So I'd encourage you to take a look at those. And I mean, I've spent years of my life learning about angel investing, a lot of it the hard way. So it's not something that that it's easy, that you can pick up easily. I'm always on a line, a lot of new points, but it's tough, but it can be, when done right and when successful, it can do great things. I mean, look at ACV auctions. They're a wonderful success story that started out as, we turned them down when they pitched us. When they pitched to us, it was 3 guys. They hadn't launched the app. They'd never sold a car yet, and they're using their app. It was just, and when we were doing our due diligence, some of our members talked to people they knew in the car business, and they said, we're not that hot on the idea. So, a couple of our members got involved, and now they're very, very happy because they invested early on, and they're going to do very, very well. But most of our members took a pass, and that happens. You win some, you lose some. So I know I've gone through a lot. There's a lot to it, but certainly I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
You can either type them in the chat or just turn on your mic.
Yeah, you can just speak them right out.
Thank you, Jack, for an amazing presentation. I learned so much. And you've also been a great coach in certain competitions and accelerators that I've seen you at already. So I was just wondering to ask you more about licensing and the sale of intellectual property. If someone is creating some sort of software and trying to build a business around that specific software, when would be a good idea to try and think about sale of intellectual property?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy either. The challenge is, because a lot of times, you'll get people who will, come to the realization that, they're inventors, they're not business people. And they've got, they've identified a need, and, through their creativity, they've developed a solution, but they haven't gone beyond that to validate whether or not there's a market there and what have you. So the risk is still high. So, they would like to find someone who would license, a business or whatever that would license this technology, but it's still, most companies, I mean, many companies don't want to license somebody else's product. They want to, they've got their own development. So it's not easy, but if you can, minimize the risk that, the product works. And, and many times the license agreement, either there's kind of a couple different buckets. One is that it's an amazing technology. So, it's being developed by, a researcher at Roswell or UB, and, they've developed, a diagnostic test for a disease, or, it's an early stage drug or whatever. And, there's usually means there's been a lot of money spent already, and they've developed something that they've been able to protect the intellectual property, because you got to do that. Otherwise, there's really nothing to license. If you don't, there's nothing to own intellectual property wise if you haven't got a patent or something on it. And it's something that, these licensees are saying, we're not going to be able to invent this ourselves. Either, because it's protected, or it would just take too much time and too much money. So it's really something that's really, really unique and special. Then it's a good licensing candidate. The other could be that, you've really, as the founder, maybe it's not so much, somebody could knock this off fairly well. Okay, I've got to patent it, hopefully. So, it won't be as easy to knock off, but they probably can. They can probably design around it. But I have been able to demonstrate that customers want it. And I have now a customer base. So I'm not just a product, but I'm a customer base as well. So this company is saying, we're willing to license this product because you've already demonstrated that it works, from a market standpoint, and they're kind of buying a customer base as well. That's tougher to do. It takes more time. It's not as easy. So the licensing is really, it's more about, I've really got a super technology here that, it's really unique, and it's gonna be hard for somebody else to replicate what I've got.
I have a question, Jack.
Sure.
Do you know can you explain a little bit about the difference between the venture capital companies and the private equity companies? I know they share a lot of commonalities, but is there any difference?
Yeah. So private equity buys existing, usually somewhat mature companies. And oftentimes private equity is a means for the founder and investors to have that exit that's being looked for. But they're to the point where, so these private equity firms, they usually have pretty high hurdles as far as how much revenue the company already is generating. They have pretty high hurdles. They usually want to see the company is profitable. So they'll say, we invest in companies that have a minimum of $50 million in annual revenue and a minimum of $5 million of EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization. So it's usually not doing startups. They're not venture capital. They're existing firms. And then they'll buy the company. Many times they'll keep a good part of the management team in place. And their model is they're saying now, but we think this company, even though it's successful and profitable, is somewhat underperforming. And that we can now make this company do even better by managing it better. And then they want to flip it and sell it. They're like house flippers. We're going to flip it this kind of in 5 years or so, 5 or 7 years, and we're going to be able to get a lot more for it because we've identified opportunities either, and it may sometimes be that we're going to buy multiple companies in that industry, merge them together, and then they have those merged companies will be worth more than they were individually. So private equity is kind of a different ball game, and it's not in the startup world.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate that.
Sure, you're welcome.
How important is it to know when to move between each, phase of funding? So knowing when to move on from your friends and family onto the next phase to an accelerator or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is it's not, there aren't clear gates. So for instance, we are in, as angel investors, we are in some deals where venture capital firms are also in. Because some VCs will go earlier, they'd be willing to take a higher risk or do a smaller deal. So some will go earlier than others. Some angels go later than others. Sometimes, it's a VC round, but they'll let some angels come in and participate as well. So it's not a clear distinction. The market will kind of tell you what stage you're at. So, if all the VCs say, you're just way too early, then okay, you were too early. So we gotta, we need to be angels and or friends and family. Angels will often co-invest with friends and family. I just sent a check out today where the angel group is investing in what's kind of a friends and family round, but we're there was enough that that they liked about it to get in. So I think you want to be talking to multiple stages and see what their interest is, and I guess kind of because you're building that line. Even though you might be too early for the VC, you started to establish some points with them, and they'll tell you if you're and one thing you want to encourage them to, because a lot of times they want to be nice. It's hard to say no. It's hard to say bad things. So they'll just kind of say, "Yeah, let's keep getting together." But I think ask them to be brutally honest with you. If they don't see themselves investing in them, until you hit certain milestones or a certain time frame, you're better off knowing it, so that you're not, you can reallocate your time to the areas that are going to be more promising for you.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Anyone else have any last minute questions?
All right, as I mentioned, I did send the pitch text to Alex, so she can send it to you, or if you got my, send my. I'll share my screen again. You can.
Yeah, the
Send,
we do have the pitch deck.
send me an email, and I'll be glad to, just, I'll send it to you directly if.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. We'll send it out to the participants. Once again, Jack, thank you so much.
You're
A lot of
welcome.
value in your presentation.
Thanks.
To our audience, thank you again for listening, and stay tuned for our next workshop next Thursday, April 15th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be focusing on summer side hustles. We also have some great events and competitions coming up, which you may have seen in the introduction slides, including the Health Futures Challenge, our Student to Biz, and of course, Get Seated. Also, you can sit in on the Panache final pitch coming up. As always, we host venture coaching and experts and residents to support your idea development. All coaching is being offered virtually, and you can find the link in our link tree. Check out our newsletter and social media at LaunchPad_UB for more information on upcoming events. If you guys anyone wants to start looking into venture coaching, we're talking a lot about venture capital, but do some venture coaching. I'll drop the link here in the chat. But otherwise, yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you once again, Jack, and have a great night.
Good night.
Also, you can feel free to stay on for UB Open Coffee Club between 6:30 or till 7:30 to kind of chat about what we just heard.
Good night.
Have a good
Thank you
one.
again. I will stop recording.
Oh, yeah, we made that mistake last time, like recording like the whole coffee